For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rick Osborne. I'm the program manager for web design and development. With me, I have...
Go ahead.
I've got Joe DeSetto, the program manager for the mobile development program. I've got Megan Hunter. She teaches a couple of our usability courses in the mobile development program. And I've got Alexia Dawson, who teaches some of the iOS and Objective-C courses in the mobile development program. And we're here today to talk about virtual teams because as you may or may not have noticed, more and more companies are having people not necessarily come into the office anymore. And that's sort of like the nirvana for us geek types, that we don't have to drive into an office to flip open our laptop and do 8 hours of work on a laptop that we could just as easily do from home. So I'm actually going to let Megan start, and we're just going to present a couple of ideas for how we've worked with virtual teams. But if y'all want to start talking about some of the stuff that you've discovered, we'll talk about that at the end of the session. So Megan?
So virtual teams, some of you may be thinking of huge groups of developers and graphic artists and perhaps instructional designers working around the globe. But virtual teams could even be just two people trying to put together a research paper in an email. So it can be anything. And there are some very common problems with any size of virtual team. And I actually want to talk about the first one, which is communication or miscommunication. And I was going to present a really boring chart of all the different paths of communication based on, a formula of how many people are actually in a team. But I actually want to include all of you guys in this lovely presentation. So if I could get, if you and you could begin a conversation, doesn't matter what you're talking about, just start talking to each other. Try and bring up your voices a little bit. Okay, now if you could pitch in, you right there, start talking to them. And it doesn't matter, just talk.
Interrupt, start talking.
Interrupt, start talking. Okay, now both of you guys over there, start talking to them, to this group here. No, interact with this group.
Interrupt them.
Yep. Okay, now if you guys over there could go ahead and try and join in the conversation. And if you need to get up and move, you can. Yep. Okay, so how's it going so far? Have you figured out why you're talking yet? Just kind of made some introductions, that's about it. So one of the things that you need to do for communications problems is develop a communication plan in the beginning. Get that going right away. You have to figure out who's going to talk to who and about what. And that's a huge deal when it comes to teams, whether it's 2 people working together, whether it's 100 people working together. And, if you think about it, miscommunication could happen regardless of who you're talking to. Think about the text message you sent to your boyfriend or girlfriend that they misunderstood, right? So they fly off the handle over something you thought was hilarious or you thought was pretty harmless. So part of that problem happens to be the fact that when you're working with a virtual team, you are not including your facial expressions. You don't see that. You're also lacking emotion, which we get through voice. So think about audio and visual are both key aspects to not having a miscommunication. So think about that, and we'll discuss some ways to remedy that a little bit later. So a second problem that you might find is, yes, quality control, thank you. Quality control, when you have multiple people, like we saw, miscommunication and quality control. You have, say, 20 programmers working on the same file. How confusing is that going to be? You have several graphic artists trying to get at the same media. You're going to have problems because, maybe this person is working on this file. You didn't know that, and for some software that could be true, like HTML. Other things like Flash, you had a little bit of version control because one person is in that file, nobody else can be. it's locked out. But we'll also talk about software solutions to fixing this issue as well. So,
Why don't we do Hangout first so his battery doesn't die?
I'm fine.
Oh, you're good?
I got it.
Well, go ahead. Yeah, take it away.
okay, we'll talk
talking?
about
Version
the
control.
version control first.
All right, so how many in here are in either the web or mobile program? Okay, so then let's flip those. Show me the people that aren't, just real quick. It seemed like it was about half and half. Awesome. What are you in, sir? Game Design Masters. Awesome. And y'all do actually use some version control in the Game Design Masters. It used to be Alien Brain. Is it still Alien Brain? Is it still something along those lines? All right. So has anybody in here heard of things like Alien Brains and Git and Subversion? I got 1, I got 2, I got 3. You might have also heard of Mercurial, or if you're coming from game, maybe Visual Source Safe is a very popular Microsoft solution. All of these things are what we refer to as source control or revision control or change management. There's a whole bunch of different names for the exact same term. And all of those things help solve the problem of two people working on the same file at the same time. Has anybody in here ever used Google Docs? So again, about half. And has anybody in here used Google Docs while somebody else is using the exact same doc? Did that like freak you out the first time you saw that? You're like, what? I didn't write that and it's typing itself and I saw this in a movie once. Right, so that's intentional because Google has come at change control and revision control in a very different direction than we traditionally think of as revision control. And Google has solved the problem by saying, it's a free-for-all, go to town, just communicate with each other. And as long as you guys know what changes you're making to that document, it's up to you. So you can go into Google Docs and you can, if you go to the file menu, you go down to version history and you can see what changes people have made, but it's not structured. You're really relying on people to make sure that the document comes out as you intend it to come out. So the other things, the Subversion and Git and all those other sorts of things, they are more traditional revision control. And the way that they do it is they say, this gentleman right here in game, he's going to be working on the source code for the artificial intelligence for the game. And he's going to check out a file, and he's going to say, I'm going to be the one guy that edits this file. Well, that's great, because then nobody else can edit that file while he's working on it, so nobody can possibly overwrite his work. But then what happens when he gets pregnant? Or what happens when he gets the measles or avian flu or something along those lines and he can't come into work, and you've got to get this artificial intelligence piece working? How do you do that if he's got the one file and you can't do anything with it? It'd be like the one guy having the key to the office and nobody could go into the office until the one guy gets there. You know, that's not very useful. So there are revision control systems that work like that. And then there are other revision control systems that say, you know what, anybody can work on this file, and Git is one of these revision control systems. And if two people make changes to the same file, the person who made the second set of changes has to fix it if anything goes wrong. And Git is really, really smart about trying really, really hard to help that second person fix stuff. So for example, he says, I'm going to make the background red, and she comes in, Tatiana, I think it was, close enough. She says, I want that background to be pink instead of red. And they both make that same change at the same time. Well, obviously, the software doesn't know which one the right one is. So the software can't figure that out. But the software is going to help Tatiana go in and go, hey, look, everything else that you two did, you agreed on, except for this one little piece right here. You, the human, need to tell me which one of these is the right one. So that's just a really quick overview of revision control software. How many of you have heard of or used a site called Github, or Bitbucket, or SourceForge, or any of those? So yeah, so these are sites that have sprung up around this idea of revision control, because as projects get larger and larger and larger, more and more people are going to be working on them. The last version of Windows that I saw, they were saying that it had over 100,000 source files. Not 100,000 lines of code, 100,000 files that go into building a version of Windows that goes on a tablet. So if you can imagine how many people are working on that all at the same time, and imagine what a giant cluster it would be if that was just willy-nilly and there was no source control there. So using sites like GitHub and SourceForge and Bitbucket and all these sorts of things, they're just free and open source versions of this stuff that corporations use to build giant apps all the time. There we go. Do we want to talk about Google Hangouts next?
Rick asked who was in web or mobile. Can you raise your hand if you're just in the mobile degree program? Excellent. Wow. Have we met yet?
No. My name's Travis.
Hi, Travis. How you doing? What class are you in?
I'm in SDI.
SDI. So it's going to be about 10 months before you see me, and it's awesome that you're seeing me because I've only met 2 of my students in the year that I've been teaching in mobile, and those 2 students worked at Full Sail.
I work here too.
Excellent. So the trend continues. I have not met a real student. You count. So I have a passion for Google Hangouts. I've used other software. I've been teaching at Full Sail for 4 years now, and Google Hangouts wasn't really out back there then. And I found that software that doesn't let me show my face really hurts my communication with other people. Megan mentioned facial features and body language. And that's really important for me as a person because I am very snarky. And I will say one thing and mean a completely different thing. And I will pick on you, like telling you that you don't matter. And you know that you matter to me because I had a big smile on my face. So Google Hangouts is my go-to for meeting with my students. And we meet weekly and talk about their code and how everything's going. And I want to show you a demonstration of Google Hangouts because I'm a big proponent for it, and you should use it if you ever need to work with anybody, especially on code. It works really well on talking about and solving code problems. So I'm going to turn on my laptop, and I'm going to invite Rick to a Hangout. So you have to go through Google+. How many people have a Google+ account? Awesome. How many people have just a Gmail account? You're connected through Gmail. Everybody that has a plus, right? If you don't have a Google account, you probably do and don't know it. You can use any email address to hook up to Google. They're all inclusive, unlike Apple. So if you go to Google Hangouts, or I mean Google+, it's down here on the left. And I'll show you just to start one. There's a big red button over here. You have an option here to invite people. You can invite people that you don't know as long as you know their name. You can start typing in and it'll give you some suggestions. It's going to first suggest people that you do know. I have to invite about 20 people every time I do my course Hangouts. I invite 2 different classes at once. So I have a group set up for that. It's actually called a circle in Google+. So I invite my whole group at once. But since it's just me and Rick talking, I'm just going to type in his name. Hello. What? White one? Rick, if you know Rick, you'll know that he has multiple personalities. You can see he has 3 accounts. And right now, he's the white Rick.
That was fairly obvious.
Just a tad.
The next option we have here, this little checkbox, is exceptional. And I use it all the time. Enable Hangouts on air. This tool can save your bacon. It actually will allow you to record your session, and the recording goes straight to YouTube. And when I say straight to YouTube, you don't have to finish recording yet. It automatically starts broadcasting to YouTube, so anybody that you invite can start watching. They don't have to join your Hangout, but if they're on the invitation, they can watch the instant stream. And this is important because Google Hangouts only allows 10 people right now. I'm going to go ahead and enable that so you can see the button. It's going to warn me about YouTube. And I'm going to hang out. And there's some options here that I want to talk about. You can turn your camera off. Obviously, I don't want to do that when I'm talking to students because I want them to see my personality and whatever. You can also turn off your microphone. This is also important because whenever Google Hangouts hears a sound, it will switch the camera at the bottom of your screen to that person. So whoever grabs the mic essentially becomes the broadcaster.
And there we
Yay,
go.
so there's us. We got the nice film strip look at the bottom. It's not switching to me because I'm talking because we have our mics turned off, probably. Rick, can you go ahead and do a screen share? Don't share your email. Yeah. So I'm not affecting anything on Rick right now, but he can show me whatever he's working on, and we can collaborate, and that's what we're here to talk about, right?
There you go. President Obama's doing it here tomorrow.
Excellent. Everybody's using this.
I'm
There's
so
actually an
there.
example of Spielberg working with Jogo Lev. So I think that's all we can do with Google Hangout right now.
I ran a virtual company for 6 years. To give you an idea of what one might look like, I was in Tampa. My iOS developer was in Fort Myers. My graphic designer was in Wisconsin. My game artist was traveling. One of my PHP guys was surfing in Panama routinely. I'm not making that up. He occasionally worked. And our Facebook developer was in LA. And all my clients, well, probably 90% of my work came from Austin. So I sort of jokingly used to advertise to clients, outsource to Florida, because it's cheaper. And because it's true that job demand in Austin dictated that our full rates were still cheaper than what they could find people for locally. So there's a few things. I mean, first of all, don't have your cat sit on the keyboard. My developer used to do that routinely, so we would be in a conference call or Hangout or similar, and all of a sudden you'd get the this kind of stuff. And it's hard to keep a straight face talking about someone's software with a cat just interrupting, and you know what the noise is, and you're trying to pass it off as, oh, we must have a bad connection. And so that's a fun one. But the thing about having this sort of distributed team is that you want to make sure, first of all, that you're very aware of what your skills are and what the people you're working with can do. The bigger problems we ran into were things with assumed skills. This guy from LA is the Facebook developer, therefore he must have some background in this specific piece. Or the graphic designer has done multiple websites for large companies, so he's aware of what he needs to do for how we're doing something for iOS. A lot of that sort of thing can get completely confused in a virtual team because there isn't any, we all go out to lunch together and talk about old jobs and that sort of thing. So you need to be clear with your team up front, introduce yourself, ask the right questions, go over the project plan with the people you're going to be working with, even if, for instance, your project manager, like myself, has already done so, just do it anyway. So that, because a lot of times you'll get somebody that, you know, they're a contractor, they don't want to sound bad to the boss. So they're like, yeah, I got it. Sure. And they're sitting there in LA like, I have no idea what that guy's talking about. I hope I don't lose this gig. And so if you're assigned, then you look stupid working with this person because you didn't ask the right questions of, do you really know what you're talking about? And you could hypothetically save a client $50,000. I wish I would have more people that ask the right questions at times. So that's a lot of what is lost in virtual teams. What's gained, obviously, is kind of this mythical idea of I can be anywhere. I can commute to work by letting my dog out in the yard and then coming to my desk. I can be, at a ski resort in Breckenridge and technically still earning a living. It does have its advantages, but for a lot of students that want to get into that world, there's a little bit of a gap of I can step right into that. The more successful telecommuters / virtual employees generally have some kind of base to draw on, whether it's local clients, whether it's a good network from school. It's amazing to me over the years how many students don't take the time to keep in touch with their alumni, their fellow alumni. Those are the people who will be on jobs that need you. But if you have a good base of work or a full-time job and you just want to freelance to get started as virtual, that's certainly easier, because you will have this sinking feeling if you are just pure virtual with no established jobs, that now you're not a virtual team. You're a person sitting at your desk in some random town, and no one knows you're there. Google Hangouts great, and Github's great, and all of this is great. If somebody is actually on the other end of the connection and needs your skills. So the marketing piece, the piece of like making sure people know what you do, even if it's just stuff you're doing on the side. My more successful virtual employees would generally just keep me in the loop of, hey, I'm working on this thing. It's not a project I'm involved in. I'm not making any money off it. Sometimes I don't even care. But it's good to know, because 6 months later I could keep that person in mind of, oh, that's right. He now knows whatever, Facebook APIs. And if I get a job in, that person gets the job. So there's also the two types of, not to be long-winded, but there's the two types of virtual teams, in that mine was more of a virtual firm where I had 4 guys that were my go-to people, and then I would add contractors. The other way to do it is like, we have a guy on our advisory committee that he is a virtual team for National Geographic. He leads iOS programming. He lives in Colorado. He works for people in Washington, D.C. And when he took that job, he had to fly to D.C. about every 2 weeks, just so they knew who he was, just so they really trusted the whole arrangement. And this is a guy who, led consulting firms of fairly large size and had a lot of credentials. And even then, he sort of had to work his way into, this will be fine. I can go back to Colorado now, right? And now he only has to do that flight maybe, once every 3 months, about a year later, which is handy because he just had a baby. The other side of it, of course, is the life side of it. A lot of what you hear about virtual firms fits if you're single and unattached and don't have any background noise. You'll hear from a lot of people who don't take virtual jobs and want to come to the office. It's because that's the only place they can get any work done, which is sad for those of us who can work at home. But we'll have people that they'll say, well, virtual's nice, but I can't work at home. There's too many kids. There's too many distractions. There's cats on the keyboard. There's all kinds of things. And so as a result, you have to gauge your own ability to work virtually if you're going to get into that world. So anyway, that's a little bit of how it really works with these tools. But anybody else want to add their own anecdotes?
Yeah, I have a really good story. So I was working, don't I always? So I was
And
working
now
on
a really good story.
Yeah, really deep thoughts for Megan Hunter. Well, so I was working on a virtual team for American Express, doing some training for them. And we had one person in Colorado working out of her house, me in Orlando, and then somebody at the Fort Lauderdale sales call center, which was their home base. And a lot of times the emails would kind of get misconstrued by one person because she took everything a little bit too sensitive. And this is where I talk about you need some face-to-face time. So use what you have, use these tools. Phone calls are better than just emails and texts, obviously, for the emotion part of it. But if you're getting the full experience, the face-to-face is best. So at one point during our testing phase, and we were working 18-hour days, so that's another thing with virtual jobs. Sometimes you end up working a lot more than maybe you would if you had an 8 to 5, office cushy job. And at one point we were going through such a hectic schedule that I made the comment in an email to one of them and said, this is a crazy testing schedule. Well, the person that was always misconstruing stuff came back and completely flamed out, like totally went crazy over that and said, are you calling me crazy? Blah, blah, blah. So that can be a really big problem if you have people that are constantly maybe thinking everything's about them, or, I'm sure everybody knows somebody like that. But so that's my story, my horror story. There's also kind of I was working on one team where you had your home base, so there was an office, say, in Tulsa, and then there were, with maybe 10 employees, and then there were a bunch of us, outsiders or foreigners that would travel there once in a while, or for the most part, just communicate through online meetings. And there's us against them. So like the 10 Tulsa employees would, kind of lash out at the, us outsiders. And that can also be a problem if you're a virtual employee. So you need to kind of keep that in mind when you're working with home teams too. Maybe, root for their football team once in a while. That might be a way in.
Especially in Tulsa.
Yeah, especially Tulsa.
I would also, just to be perfectly clear, working on a virtual team does not necessarily mean working from home. I happen to know that I don't have cats and I don't have kids and I don't have anything like that, so I don't have a lot of distractions at home, but I have the entire internet, and that is like a giant distraction. So I still, in order to get into a work headspace, I actually have to leave my apartment. So I will spend just hours and hours doing work at Starbucks or at First Watch or, wherever has Wi-Fi, or even if they don't, that's what tethering is for. And just because to me, there is a different headspace between being at home and not being at home and doing work. So long story short, it doesn't mean that you've got to be working from home. It just could mean that you aren't going into an office. And there are plenty of shades of gray in between those two things.
Yeah, that probably applies to a lot of you too, going to school. If you probably find yourselves at home, maybe, watching Doctor Who or something, instead of doing your homework. So, maybe like break away, go somewhere that you could connect virtually and get away from your distractions. That definitely helps.
Yeah, I would say one of the things with virtual work is you kind of get used to planning for the worst, whether it's, being locked out of somewhere you were planning on working, or, power failures, or you don't have a shared experience of, if there's a hurricane coming through Winter Park, the whole school's pretty much aware of it. But if you just don't hear from someone from LA for a while, you're like, I don't know I'm not going to speculate what their issue is, and it could be weather, and it could be earthquakes, and it could be ex-wives, and it could be anything. So you want to kind of plan for, how do I get a hold of you? When is it appropriate to call your personal number? Any of that sort of thing too. And then do your own experimenting with, can I work here? The Starbucks thing is a great example, because for a lot of people who aren't used to virtual work, it's just kind of obnoxious or hipster or something that you have your laptop and you're on Google Hangout and I'm trying to order a latte or something. But that's actually already been proven by, behavioral psychologist types, that all the distraction and the noise and all of that at a coffee shop, you're actually more effective working than sitting in a quiet room. That was particularly for programmers and jobs that required intense concentration, where you would think you'd be distracted, but it actually made people focus more. But that's something you need to figure out, but while you're still in school, so that you already know your own work habits. You already know, if you're being recruited to a firm and they're like, it's great, you can work from anywhere, and you're like, I don't really need to work from anywhere. or what's important to you in terms of, how this stuff fits your work style. And also, what piece is actually portable. For me, anything to do with video was only at my home office because I just, it's one thing to not be distracted. It's another to be trying to talk into a camera while I'm at Starbucks. That didn't work for me at all. Plus the background noise of things like espresso makers and all starts to be a little much on video. But for other people that works really well, and you just kind of have to adapt to your work style, so.
I think another point there is you kind of touched on the idea of the psychology behind it. And that brings up the interesting point that working in a virtual environment is not for everybody. If you've ever heard of something called seasonal affective disorder, SAD, what that is people who get sad because there's no sunlight. So in Florida, it's not a huge thing, but in like Seattle, that's a big deal because they get like 2 hours of sunlight a year or whatever it is. And and so people like my wife, for example, is somebody who, when she doesn't get regular sunlight, it shuts her down. Well, the same thing goes for human interaction. Those of us that are in web and mobile, it's sort of the running joke that we're all dorks and we all live in caves and we don't ever actually want to talk to anybody. And that's a great joke. But the reality of it is that some of us, no matter how much we want to be introverted and how much we want to be self-sufficient, we sometimes need to reach out and talk to other people and not just see them on a computer screen, but actually see their entire body and see how they react to you and have them smile in a way that's not all pixelated and crazy. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of who we all are. And so the fact that if you've ever tried working on a virtual team and you just can't make it work, maybe that's just not for you, and that's okay.
And it even can be specific per person. Like I worked with one developer specifically that was one of my go-to people, highly skilled individual, virtually. When we got together in person, we didn't really like each other at all. I'm an extrovert, he's an introvert. He just thought, can I go back to my desk now at home, 40 miles away? Yeah, and it didn't work. So I just gave up on any in-person meetings. I was like, I would ask him, we both were baseball fans, for instance. I'd be like, you want to drive up, catch the game together? Happened once, and then I just let it go. Like, he actually likes to sit by himself in the upper deck, surrounded by nobody. I think it's weird. To me, that's not my personality. But, I was like, we're just going to leave it at that. I will see you on your laptop. And it's just, so, if you're that kind of introvert person, that's fine. As long as you can at least get across your skills before you go back to your desk, then there are people out there that are managers that will understand that. And similarly, if you're the extrovert type, the virtual team thing will find you booking a lot of conferences because everybody at the conference is like, oh, I got out of my house this week. This is so great. So anyway, did we want to leave time for questions, or is that, or are we just going to keep talking?
No, keep talking for a minute.
All right. Should we just keep talking?
Yeah, we'll just keep talking.
Okay. Anyone like to keep talking?
I think another pro tip for you guys, and I hate that phrase, so I'm just going to take that back. Another tip for you guys that are going to try virtual teams or have tried virtual teams and can't quite get it to work. Proactive communication. I know that's something we just talk about over and over and over again at Full Sail. It is doubly so for virtual teams. The idea of, even if you only wrote 2 lines of code over the course of the day, or even if you only went into Photoshop and added a drop shadow, whatever it is that you did, doesn't matter how little it is, you need to communicate that to your boss. Because here's the thing. You may be the most awesome rock star of a person and you go into your virtual cave and 6 weeks later you emerge and the entire project is complete. You will not get invited back to make more money later because you are then the product that you produced and not what you went through to produce it. But if you are checking in, even if it's a single sentence in an email or whatever, every single day, your boss, your team, builds up that aggregate personality for you. They start to get a sense of your sense of humor, and they start to get a sense of your productivity, and all of these little things that fills in your personality around the email. But if you never actually communicate those things, you will never succeed.
I think that goes for being a student too. You know, being a teacher, we don't get to see your personalities a lot of times. You're surrounded by, 20 or so other people. And if you're quiet the whole time, even if you do 100, maybe you want to come back later and ask us for a recommendation. You need to stand out a little bit. So try and practice that in school as well. I mean, don't be a teacher's pet, but try and bring some of your personality to class. Bring some of your, your wisdom. You all have this background that you're bringing in, and try and show that, so that goes with school and work.
And I think that's actually not just your value to clients or bosses, that actually ends up being value to yourself. Once in a while, as you work on these projects, you'll find people that are just exceptionally talented. Like one individual, for example, is as good a programmer as you will meet, and also an exceptional 3D artist. You just don't meet those people very often. He makes probably $50,000 a year less than he should, because he just does his work at his house, doesn't talk to anybody. Nobody really knows what he's worth. His boss isn't going to tell him because he's making an extra $50,000 a year off him. And so if he was more proactive with, and he's finally started to do it, I kind of nudged him you should talk about what you do, man. With, blogging and inside looks at projects and within contractual obligations, of course. But, that sort of thing to give people an idea, this is how this appeared in the world, not just that I'm good at it and I'll talk to you when I'm done. That does actually change not only your value proposition, but how you market yourself, how you, your job opportunities ultimately. So it's an important piece all around, not just for recognition, that person is awesome, but it's actually goes down to what you make for a living at some point.
So now that we're down to about the 15-minute mark,
Oh, I see.
trying to give them value for their
I was
time.
trying to give them 10 more minutes of questions. You kept talking.
Yeah, well, that's what I do. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, we've got somebody in the back. Hold on, I'm gonna run and we'll do a microphone thing, except that my leg is asleep, so this is gonna be awesome.
Are you really doing that?
Yeah, why not?
Thank you, Oprah.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you all for talking today. I appreciate that. All the talks have been great. This one in particular, I've worked with virtual teams, and of course, I've worked with students here at Full Sail as a lab specialist. And of course, I've always had the mindset that anybody that I work with, no matter what their output is, I can always salvage something. I can always have them bring something to the project. And I've always worked on projects where it's either in school or it's been pro bono. You folks have been out as professionals working with people, and time was money. I've never had to do it yet. I'm wondering how you deal with firing people. What do you have? Is it cold-blooded? You just threw an email, I gotta let you go? Do you actually fly out to these people and talk to them? We need to do something about your output, or what it is that we need. Please, any feedback?
It's never cold-blooded. It's never, I'm just going to close this browser window and never talk to you again. Goodbye, virtual person. Sometimes you wish you could do that. Now, one of the things you learn in the industry is no matter how many thousands of people are in it, it is an extremely small world, almost eerily so. So no, you don't. You have to handle it as diplomatically as you can. I guess the short version is you have to remember that even virtually there is a person involved. Generally, no, unless there's some legal situation like they stole files or something, you're not going to get on a plane. And even then, you're probably going to get a lawyer involved first. There are legal obligations of hiring somebody if they're full-time. You need to document what's going on in case they say it's a improper firing, et cetera. So really the paper trail is the important piece of the whole process. So you have to keep in mind, like, this isn't working out, and actually start to put that in some form that you can look back at it in Basecamp, in email, in something that you can pull up and say, dude, I asked you 8 times now. Do you exist anymore? What is, and kind of give the person an opportunity to respond. But yeah, I think you have to be as diplomatic as you can, and you ultimately have to point to why they don't fit in the project. I mean, you could just take the, I don't like you. That is all. But that's, usually there's some specific reason. We found somebody with these skills and they offer this that you don't. Come back to me in a year, maybe we'll talk about another project. And sometimes that's not just talking. I've worked with people that did not work out, and 2 years later, they did work out. Sometimes, especially when you hire a lot of younger people. Like, I taught for 7 years before ever joining Full Sail, so I actually ended up hiring a lot of my former students, and it's interesting to see. What you can't kind of picture now is that sometimes people that have limited skills and aren't really very effective on a project, well, 5 years later, they've done a lot more work, and they're suddenly pretty effective at what they do. So you always have to keep that in mind, that except for the rare case of somebody that's just a complete loss, that they're just like, this isn't for you, and I don't even know how you got out of college. Aside from that person, generally there's something valuable to find from somebody. And even people I've let go from projects have referred work to me because, well, how do I say this diplomatically? Sometimes those people find their way to marketing. And so, it's just like, your technical skills are not good, but you kind of get what's going on. They start to realize as they're out of school, I'm better at talking about this stuff than doing it. I'll leave you guys to debate that one on your own, I guess. But yeah, the Jobs versus Wozniak thing, maybe building the stuff isn't for you. And so you also have to keep that in mind as well. So I don't know if that helps anybody.
I think something to add on real quick there is working with a virtual team is exceptionally challenging for management. And in my ideals, part of being a good manager is finding that seed in a person that is exceptional. You were saying you can salvage work out of anybody. But a good manager will be able to identify what that person does exceptionally well and make use of that. So maybe you put him on a project and you needed him to write the HTML, but it turns out that he's exceptional at design, and you assigned him to the wrong thing. So it's an extra challenge for a virtual manager to get engaged to that point, and sometimes it's better to leave it open-ended and just empower those team members. Hey, I want you to do this, but this team over here is working on this different thing. Let everybody know what's going on that project. And if you have something to contribute, make sure that everybody feels empowered and feels that ownership with what's going on. And maybe you just find out that this person would be a great asset in another part of the project.
Other questions? Oh, one in the back.
Hi, first and foremost, thank you for sharing your experience with us. What we want to know is there any online venue where we can just go and find employers for virtual teams and stuff like that, or
Flex jobs.
Flex jobs?
Yeah, that's a really good one.
So you just go there and people are looking for skills and
Oh yeah, yeah.
you just
There's a lot of stuff.
Flex Jobs has lots of virtuals. T-Jobs, which is telecommuting jobs, is another one, not to go back to the working from home thing, but they do have technical. And yeah, it's a trick, because what you'll often find is employers list their virtual jobs as city plus anywhere. So you kind of end up hacking job boards in terms of like, you're looking in New York City for the ones that say or anywhere, or you're looking in San Francisco for the ones that say or anywhere. And the reason a lot of them do that is a lot of virtuals, when you really get into the job description, it's they want you to work on site somewhere, even if it's for 3 months, so they know who you are and how your work ethic is and all that. Then they'll say, go ahead, get on a plane, and I don't want to see you again.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of it is still looking for those. Like I've always thought that like LinkedIn and all the rest of them should add like an anywhere location, because it's kind of silly how you have to hunt around for that. 37 Signals job board, same thing. Very technical positions, very high paying jobs generally, but they don't have any specific way to do it. So you'll just see city or anywhere, or city and other. So.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Who's next? Anybody? Oh, one in the front.
Now, you guys already talked about this a little bit, but just to put a different spin on it, a different way of looking at it. I know you guys have worked in the industry and you guys have done certain things and working with virtual teams, and not even necessarily with virtual teams this question's about, but when you don't have those external motivators, when it's not a job or it's not the classroom where you can just say, if you don't work, you don't get paid, or if you don't do my work in class, you won't pass the class or whatever, that serve as external motivators. So what do you do when you're working with a team in general, be it a virtual team would make it considerably more difficult, how to get people to work together and be a part of a team and working with those team dynamics and just, getting those things to work?
Well, I think the same goes for any team, whether you're virtual or co-located. You need a common goal. The goals are what drives the team. So you need to set a goal, and if everybody's working towards the same thing, and it has to be something that the team decides, not one particular person in general, but the team needs to come up with what is our goal as a team. And as long as everybody's contributing to that goal, then you'll find that people are more willing to work on this team.
Yeah, I copied the Google thing, which was the 20% of your hours are your thing. Like we actually ended up putting out iPhone games a few years ago because it was kind of the carrot at the end of the stick for my developers. If we have our billable hours done by Thursday, Fridays they get to build games and they're still on salary. And it worked out. I mean, because I knew it was high risk, and because as far as me getting a return on my, that piece of their salary, but I felt like ultimately the clients, the first 4 days of the week were covering that. It was a lot more fun for them to know on Fridays it was just kind of their side project, really, that happened to still be part of their job. It gave them something to talk about in their spare time, too, between each other, so they kind of got to know each other more. And in some cases, pull in friends of theirs with other skills that they didn't have a place for on our regular work, which was, at the time, iOS point-of-sale systems, which is fairly dry work. So I think finding something that they're into, which I know for developers, games is usually a good place to start asking that, but finding something that they're into that might motivate them and say, look, we'll call it part of your job as long as the actual work gets done. That worked for me for a while, so that's just one other suggestion.
This kind of echoes back to what I was saying about being a good manager, but if you're part of a team and you see somebody starting to slack off, and this is good advice for student teams as well, instead of attacking or going directly at that person, why didn't you do this, or we need you to do this, why isn't it done? You might want to start out getting to know that person by asking them what their personal goal or what their personal stake is in that project that you're working on. Even if they don't have a goal, even if they don't have any personal investment in it, just asking the question shows that you care, and also might kick them in the pants to think about it. Like, oh, I could actually gain something of value for myself from working on this project. And once you know that, you can relate anything that they're supposed to do to reaching that personal goal. And that helps build that community within that group. Do you want to talk about game night? Because I think that would be an excellent example.
Yeah, sure, why not?
So in the mobile program, about a year ago, I guess, we realized that our instructors were going to be spending a lot of time at night logged into iChat so that our mobile students could call them up and get some help and screen share and all those other sorts of things. And like Megan was saying earlier, when you're doing that sort of virtual team, virtual support sort of thing, it's very easy to all of a sudden realize that you're working 12 and 18-hour days. So you wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning and you start doing some grading, or you start doing email, or you start doing whatever, and then all of a sudden it's 10 o'clock at night and you're still doing that stuff. And as teachers, it's the exact same thing. So what we started doing was on Tuesday nights, when even though we tell students to start on Saturdays, nobody actually starts on their projects until Tuesdays because they're due on Thursday. We knew that was a high demand night. So we get together, and we've been doing it every Tuesday since, where we get together and from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, we play board games while we all have our laptops out and are helping the students. And so what did we play last night? I think it was Trivial Pursuit last night, but normally it's like obscure stuff like Munchkin and just Dominion and a whole bunch of really random stuff. And that has worked out really, really well because it's an online program, so it's a mostly virtual team, but that one night a week we spend 3 hours together, and it's semi-casual. Everybody is doing work, but we're all actually playing at the same time. And that juxtaposition really, really helps us bond. So if you can find that thing that links those two things, you'll be very successful. For us, it's game night, but there are always other things.
And I actually accidentally found myself collaborating with more people on our team during game night because we were sharing responsibilities and not really knowing it. We have students progressing through each month, and somebody would get a question from a student and voice that, and maybe another one of us had an answer, or another one of us knows that student, and we can say, oh, yes, I know why he's asking that, because when he was in my class, he was having this certain problem. And that kind of thing, that like spontaneous collaboration is just, it's priceless for me.
I did want to say one other point to your thing about how do you motivate people who you don't feel are easily extrinsically motivated? How do you provide those carrots on the end of those sticks? As web, mobile, technical people, it's very, very easy for us to think that we can be managers because we know all the things. And that's a really bad trap to fall into, because what makes a person a good manager is not that they know all the things, it's that they're able to help people connect to each other, especially in a team environment. And Megan kind of said this in a slightly different way, but that ability to make connections between people, either that connection is, hey, I happen to know that this person is really, really good at this thing over here, and this problem that you're having, you really need to talk to this person. So instead of saying Google it or whatever, you say talk to this person. Or I happen to know that this person isn't so great at this job, but we've got this opening over here that this guy's doing it, but I could retask this other guy over here, and basically you can play chess with your people and get everybody doing the jobs that they are best suited to do and that they can best contribute to the team. So long story short, that making those connections is far more important than knowing all the things. So that would be my advice. We are down to about 60 seconds, so I think we are pretty much done in here. Did you have anything else anybody wanted to add?
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, so we have 4 sessions tomorrow. They're not going to be in this building. They're going to be over in 4A 108. 4 sessions on mobile development. So check your schedule for that. If you need details on that, definitely come and see one of us after the thing, and we will be hanging out and we can answer individual questions. Otherwise, thank you for coming and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.